It is the first Friday of March 2019. I'm Brenda, you know what I mean?
Yes, it means the Big Ten once again.
Oh yes, the Big Ten, where we're meeting here today to help you close your business week. We hope you had a successful one, despite a lot that's happening in the economy. More corruption.
More strikes.
More strikes indeed. And to help us do that for you today, we are joined by... All right, Brenda, let's close the week, shall we?
Let's begin. We begin the Big Ten with one of the biggest issues on the mind of Kenyans, corruption. Corruption has been rife in the post-colonial government, creating a history that spans from the era of the Jomo Kenyatta, Mwai Kibaki, Daniel Arap Moi and the Uhuru Kenyatta government.
That is indeed true because according to the Corruption Index Perceptions 2012, Kenya ranks 139 out of the 176 that is for most corrupt countries, with Nigeria, Nepal and Pakistan taking the top positions in the list.
Most bribes paid by urban residents in Kenya are fairly small, but large ones are also taken. Bribes worth 50,000 Kenyan shillings account for the 41% of the total value, but there's also corruption as seen in the recent headlines in larger scales.
Despite reforms in the sector, recent several surveys indicate that the procurement sector and other companies have had to encounter demands for bribes to get things done in Kenya.
Therefore, what is the cost of corruption and its implication on the Kenyan budget and the economy?
The cost to the economy is a bit difficult to get the exact figure of the cost itself. But how we analyze corruption in an economy is that you look at the opportunity cost. If you lose 100 billion, what can 100 billion do to farmers? What can 100 billion do to build schools or in education sector? So how many kids are missing places in schools because of corruption? I think that would be a better way to look at it. In terms of budget, we lose around a third into corruption, and most of them, 70% is procurement fraud. Around 40% is misreporting and failure to comply with laws, procurement laws and all that. So that's the biggest problem that we have. Now, corruption itself is a systemic problem that we've had since independence, and that's how we built our economy itself. We've built our politics and economics through patronage, that you have to have access to somebody and then somebody helps you within the... So that's where the corruption itself starts. So it starts from how we organize ourselves from the party positions, getting into office and governance, now translates it to the economy. So it's an expensive affair that has cost us a lot of billions and maybe trillions since independence, where we are today.
There are different impacts of whatever is happening. For instance, if public funds have been diverted, funds that are meant to, let's say, for instance, build infrastructure, these funds have been diverted, they've ended up in the pockets of few people. It means that project will not take place. That project was meant to benefit the taxpayer. So it means now the taxpayer has been paying out money and they're not getting benefit, or they're not getting a return on the money they've been paying, taxes. Again, it means you're looking at the cost of foreign direct investment. So investors will not want to sink in their money in a country where the leaders are known to be corrupt. Again, the ordinary mwananchi, if let's say for instance money meant for development acquired through a loan, Eurobond for instance, and that money is lost through corruption, it means first of all taxpayer will pay more to repay the loan. It means the taxpayer will not get the services this guy is wanted. Again, which has an overall effect, or has a ripple effect, meaning that the poor guys in the community will not have access to government services. It means these guys, if for instance the money was meant to go build a hospital, it's only the rich who will be able to afford medical services. The poor guys down there will not be able to afford medical services, will not be able to tap onto the benefits of this project. For instance, if the money was meant for healthcare, I think it has an overall ripple effect, cascading from the bigger picture, how the country looks like from the outside, to what the common mwananchi on the ground will feel. Basically means they will just continue feeling the pressure more.
I don't think anyone in the world has stopped corruption 100%. You try to minimize it, and so you work with a probability of maybe 10% is what you can handle. I don't think that we've put well strategies that we can handle, a long-term strategy that we can handle corruption itself. Because corruption itself starts from how we organize from the political parties itself, then how these people move to government itself. Because you move to government and they come in with their people and they come with personal interest placed ahead of national interest itself. So it's a bigger conversation as Kenyans that need to have on what exactly do we need, what is the moral fiber of a politician or a leader who is coming into office. That's where the conversation starts. But we are not yet there. Even the current fight that we're seeing about corruption, it's just smoke and mirrors. We are not to see the tangible things about it.
Let's cross over to the currency markets now, where the local currency has so far backed the depreciation trend of other African currencies against the dollar by rising or strengthening to a 10-month high of 100.03 units against the dollar. Now the local currency also traded at a high of 100.80 units. That was as of December 24th, 2018, against the greenback.
Analysts have consistently overlooked the shilling's depreciation against the dollar based on twin deficits, fiscal and current. In the process, they failed to account for the unique capital inflows into the country that prop up the currency.
So now let's get a proper understanding of what causes this shift in the shilling and what this means to our currency and the economy as well.
We can start by saying that sub-Saharan African economies have suffered in terms of trying to stabilize your currency. The Kenya shilling has been one of the best performing currencies in the whole 1 year period that we're talking about. And the issue is that we've tried to manage a CBK itself, Central Bank of Kenya has tried to manage it. So the dynamics and the fundamentals about the currency is that it's about demand and supply. It's importers and exporters who are the main people. So an importer will buy dollars because he will want to go and buy things in China or in London, and then the exporter will be paid in dollars somewhere as exporting flowers in the UK or somewhere, and then he will want to buy the Kenya shillings. So those are the two main dynamics. Then there are speculators, people who want to see if the dollar goes up, they can make money and all those. So those are bankers, and many speculators are there. So that's one of the other people, one of the other players. The third is that you talk about foreign remittance, the people who live diaspora, most of them send money. So we've seen that third bit as the one that has been stabilizing the shilling of late. And it comes around 100 billion every year from diaspora people sending money. Yes, so it's a lot of money. So those are the three things. I think central bank has also tried to stabilize the shilling itself, because that's the role of central bank itself, the mandate. You try to balance that risks are not high, because when it goes higher or goes lower, there is somebody who faces a very big risk, either the exporter or the importer. And the effect of that is that there's a ripple effect to it. If you're an exporter, then it means you might be making losses, you might cut down cost. If it's an importer, you're bringing in goods, it means that you'll probably pass prices which will be higher when you're importing goods to the consumer itself. So those are the dynamics. So that's where inflation comes in. When you have high imports or high cost of importing goods, you have inflation coming in.
KQ makes it to the Big Ten this week once again as it announces another Dreamliner expected this year as it expands its network route structure. The national carrier also plans on adding 187 new staff to its payroll.
True indeed, Brenda. Now the carrier has 895 flight attendants and insists that adding more staff will not render any of them jobless, even as there is a planned takeover of operations at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport and a planned merger with the Kenya Airports Authority. Now, it is clear that there's a financial crunch at the airline, but the question is adding another Dreamliner a solution to its problems?
Acquiring a new Dreamliner could be good. Perhaps they've done their own market study and they've seen this route will be better than this route. But before they actually go ahead and invest money, I think they should have done studies, come up with figures. The figures need to support the investment to show that yes, we will pump in a number of billions, and this number of billions we have this number of clients who regularly travel on this route. This route, we can connect it with this route, and if we channel it through maybe this airport, we will get this number of passengers, and this number of passengers will translate to this number of figures. And at the end of the day, our book balance or our balance sheet will look, or our income statement will look positively, or it will reflect positively on our income statement, which is good. I haven't seen the figures, so I haven't seen the projections. The projections are to the best of my recollection, even in the reported news, they have not indicated how or what projections they're looking at. On the other side, it's good. They're about to hire about 200 cabin crew members or staff crew, which is good for employment. Yeah, but again, now it would be sad to see if these guys who've been hired 2, 3, 4 years down the line, they are retrenched because business or the business idea cannot be supported.
There is a two-part to that question, because the new Dreamliners and how it is designed by Boeing is that it costs you cut your cost in terms of fuel. You cut your cost around 50% before. So it's a very cost-effective planes. That's the main reason that most airlines are buying it. So looking forward long term, all airlines will be going towards the Dreamliner side. Now the question is, does KQ have the financial capacity to move this direction, because they're reporting losses every year, and these are investments that you need to put in, because if you're looking at going that direction. So the bigger question is that KQ is not in a position per se that this is the direction they will want, because it's an investment and they don't have money to invest in that. I think KQ's biggest problem, it's a managerial issue, and the losses are managerial in terms of they're not financial, because most of things, the losses are out of overheads running the airline itself. So you have a bloated workforce, you have many contractors, there politicization of contracts, so there are politicians who are getting contracts there and all those kind of things. And airlines have a small margin, so you have to be very efficient in how you operate. So KQ's biggest problem is managerial problem, and we are yet to see anything changing in the short term, because the same dynamics are. Now we talk about the JKA deal and all those kind of things. It will be wrong for them to require JKA, because JKA needs an expansion itself. So it means an investor who comes in is somebody who invests in upgrading that airport to world standards. KQ are reporting losses. They are not in a financial capacity to do that. So I think KQ are missing the point that they need to look at themselves internally first on how you address your issues internally before looking at such measures.
If you are an employer or an employee, let's close the week by telling you that this story is definitely for you, because it's about your paycheck, how much you contribute, how much you get to take home at the end of the month.
Yes, Simba, as the National Social Security Fund, NSSF, is in and out of court talks with Workers' Union Court to aiming to unlock a dispute that could see retirement deductions rise to 1,080 Kenyan shillings from 200 Kenyan shillings and continue to increase in the next 5 years.
Now that is true indeed, Brenda, because the stalled NSSF Act, all right, which has introduced the changes, looks to increase the monthly contributions from employers to match employee deductions. Now, NSSF and FKE are in talks with Kutu as well to have this introduced in the course of this year. Once introduced, it shall see employers compelled to save more for their retirement and a rise in compliance from employees, that is in terms of costs.
This is amid both wrangles and misappropriation of workers' contribution to the state agency founded in 1965. Now, is this increment worth it? Why the difference, and what does it mean to the working Kenyan citizen?
Yes, they're allowed to do that, because there's a new act that's being challenged in court by Kotu that proposes to increase the rate of contribution for employers from the 200 to the 1080. Enhanced contribution is good, because it means people will be able to get more when they retire. When pensioners contribute, or when employees contribute towards pension, the pension company, or NSSF in this case, is meant to invest that income. Because let's say you've started contributing from age 25 when you start working, and you retire at age 60 or 65. You see, you could be contributing monthly. That money should not sit down in an account somewhere. So pension fund, such as NSSF, is allowed to invest it in certain industries. I think real estate, government bonds, to a certain threshold anyway. So when they invest this money, they're supposed to get a return, which again will facilitate paying guys who retire.
The NSSF deductions are statutory. They are statutory obligations, so they pass through a law. How they calculated that increase, I'm not sure that they've shared it with the public itself, because how did they arrive to that figure of 1,800 every month? But going forward, I think that law first will have to be passed by Parliament, that increase itself. So I doubt that will make it, because the public uproar will not allow it. Second is that NSSF doesn't have the operations open. So you talk about if you're increasing those costs, what are people benefiting out of it? Because you look at NSSF's budget, around 50 to 60% goes to recurrent expenditure. So they're left with around 40% to do their mandate itself. Now, the threshold they should be is around 35% of recurrent expenditure, then 70% goes to paying the mandate they themselves do in terms of investment and paying people on pensions when they're due. So there are questions that we need to ask, even if you want to have the increase. Have they managed people's funds all these years in a very well structured manner? So that will be the question also NSSF will need to answer to convince Kenyans that they deserve to be given more in terms of managing the funds itself as a fund manager. The negative effect is that might be some inflation, because it means the cost of living might go higher for everyone, because your income is same, but government is making more deductions. So it means that you cannot afford many things. So the ripple effects to the economy might be not very good, will be negative.
All right, now let's close your week by looking at something different as well that happened or shaped your week. A striking nation. Hundreds of passengers were trapped at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport Wednesday after Kenya Airports Authority workers downed their tools.
Now, the strike was called in order to protest against unfair hiring, poor remuneration, and the proposed takeover of the airport by Kenya Airways. It involved cargo workers, ground workers, and support service workers who are members of the Kenya Aviation Workers Union.
I can count a lot of strikes. We have had the nurses strikes, we have the matatu strikes, we have the teacher strike, now the Kenya Airports Authority strikes, more strikes and more strikes. The question is, let's give you a perspective of the pattern of the strikes in Kenya and what is the effect of the strikes to the Kenyan economy?
The thing is, when you see that there are numerous strikes in an economy, it means that the standards of living are dropping and people feel that they need to earn more. So the income that I had is not sufficient for me. And that's how you see that. It means that your economy is probably having a problem in terms of producing jobs and the income level that you're having within the economy. So that's the general thing. And many people analyze it that you're probably in a contraction heading to a recession if you see those number of strikes recurring very fast. So I think that's the biggest problem that we have. So the indicator is that I think we have an income problem in Kenya, and we can look at it because of inequality. So the people who earn very much income at top, and then the lower cadre in Kenya, people around, I think 40% of people earn less than 9,000 workforce. Yes. And then if you move up, I think around 60 to 70% earn less than 50,000. So for an economy that we are in, a middle income, lower middle income, those are low income. So going forward, if government doesn't do more strategies on how do you help people with their standards of living, especially if you're increasing taxes, you're increasing deductions of NSSF and all that, all these strikes will be happening because people feel that their income is not sufficient. So the analysis to the economy is that you probably are having a slowdown, because if you're having recurrent strikes in different departments and sectors, it means there are few days that people are not working, so productivity goes down and all those kind of things. So there's disruption because people will demonstrate and all those kind of things. So it means that you're probably having a slowdown in your economy to some point.
Well, the Big Ten takes a short break. We shall be right back.
Don't go anywhere. Kenyans know about business terms is something I love doing. You've heard of the word debit. This one I know you know.
We are keen on actively playing our role in positioning Kenya as an investment hub for East and Middle Africa.
Welcome back to the Big Ten. Remember, if you want more episodes of the Big Ten, do follow us on our social media platform at Metropol TV KE. But for now, let's get back to where we had left it. Now moving on to the energy sector as we take a look at one of Kenya's biggest power producers company, that is Kenya Power, as analysts have warned that if the company continues to have corporate governance issues and being dependent on debt financing, it's likely to weigh down its stock at the Nairobi Securities Exchange, despite trading at a discount.
Now, the utility that announced its 2018 results to December last week showed a drop in the profits of half the year. That stood at 16% drop to 2.46 billion shillings, owing this to higher expenditures in its operations.
Although the company is trading at a price to earnings and price to book multiples of 6.3 and 0.1 respectively against the sector median of 5.3 and 0.8, there still remains a great concern of the company's political interference of its public affairs and its growing debt.
Now, Kenya Power's total debt stands at 115.87 billion shillings. Now, 16.8 billion shillings of this debt is repayable under 1 year. But 99.9 billion shillings of this debt has a longer maturity period that is more than 1 year. So the question is this: with this understanding, what happens to the share price movement of the company, and what about the pricing of the commodity by Kenya Power?
First, that Kenya Power is still a stable company as a publicly listed company, and so that will not be happening anytime soon. I think the biggest problem that Kenya Power had is that when Jubilee government came in, they said one of the things is bringing electricity to many people. So they invested a lot of funds, and Kenya Power also took some loans to try to meet that target. And we powered, I think, 3 million people, but there was no demand for it. They were not buying electricity. So you invested, but you're not getting returns back as Kenya Power. So they ended up with a number of short-term debts, which is the figures you're talking about. And so looking forward, I think it's not a crisis that we can point out, because you can refinance it. That you ask for, if I owe you money and it's due today, I can ask for another person to give me, and then I pay you, then I extend the period that I will pay and talk to him, maybe I'll pay him in 2 months. So that's the refinancing. So you can just move the dates. If it's a short-term debt, you can move the dates on when those dates are due. So Kenya Power still has, I think Kenya Power, the current problem they have is a managerial issue also, because Auditor General gave them a qualified opinion. So a qualified opinion means that there are serious issues you need to address in your balance books of accounts. Liabilities are growing more than assets and all those kind of things. So the trajectory itself on the short term of Kenya Power is not good. But long term, it's a stable company, and so the share pricing might think a little bit here and there for the short term. So if somebody you're buying 2-3 months there, your pricing might be fluctuating because of those. Because when you're given a qualified opinion, it's not a good indicator if you're a public listed company. And then you talk about liabilities, the loans that they're having, in terms compared to assets, they have a lot of loans that they need to pay. So those are indicators that are not good in the short term. So the share price might be fluctuating a little bit, but you'll not be among the best performing.
Still in debt. Now, if you own a car simply parking the CBD, you may have to pay parking fees As this story highlights the issue on parking and parking fees, as a new report revealed that Deputy President William Ruto's office owes 203 million Kenyan shillings worth of parking fees.
That is indeed true because the Deputy President's office owes the City Hall 203 million Kenyan shillings, making it number one out of the 11 government offices that owe the City Hall money. Now, the office owes 189.08 million shillings of the 113 parking slots along Arambe Avenue and another 14.06 million Kenyan shillings for 10 slots along Parliament Lane since 2014.
Mr. William Ruto's office is running on a slim budget of 180 million Kenyan shillings in this financial year.
The question is that, why has this office gone so untouched for quite a long time with such a huge debt? Number two, should you be concerned about rising parking fees? And number three, how is City Hall going to ever recover from such a debt?
For that debt to accumulate to that amount, I saw they have nearly 114 parking slots. So I was wondering, the office of the Deputy President has been allocated or has procured from the county 114 parking slots. Kwani everyone who works in that office drives? Yeah? Does everyone in that office drive that they need 114 parking slots? Yes, I know probably the Deputy President, his entourage, he needs to have reserved slots for people who come to see him. But 114, I think 114 is quite a huge number. As in, even us in our office, not everyone gets a parking slot. So I think on the DP's office, I think there's a bit of wastage in the sense that 114 slots is a huge number. Then again, from the county side, it's unfortunate that they've let this debt escalate to the point it has escalated. So how does it reflect on the governor and county officials who are tasked with generating revenue for the county when they've let a debt accumulate to that amount?
How counties deal with national government is that that bill should go directly to, it's allocated to national government itself. So at the end of the year, we've seen quite a number of these, that counties should bill national government on what they feel that is accrued debt. And this should include even the Deputy President's parking and all those kind of things. So it's factored in the budget of the National Assembly, of the national government itself, on how do you pay. So it's an easy way because county governments can pay back, because there are a number of things that county government own, national government and national government can own. So just swipe those debts. But of late we've seen that national government owes county governments, especially of Nairobi, a lot of funds. And so it creates a problem in trying to recoup them, because government does not have money to pay. Because I think before the previous governor, when it was before 2017 under Kidero, they said the national government owes Nairobi County government around 100 billion. 100 billion is money for 3 ministries or something. So there is no way, national government cannot give you that amount. So they need to find a way on how you settle those things. And then you can just swipe in terms of assets and all those kind of things. Or in terms of a project that you do a partnership, and then county governments can recoup their percentage from there, because currently government doesn't have money to pay such huge debts. So I'm not sure how the Deputy President accrued those debts, but it needs to be under national government, then county governments can recoup from national government as a whole.
It is good news for the Kenyan banking sector as profits in 2018 hit a record of 152.3 billion Kenyan shillings. Now, earnings from pre-tax profits in the Kenyan banking sector hit a record 152.3 billion Kenyan shillings, preceding the earnings recorded before the introduction of interest laws 2 years ago.
CBK data shows that lenders' earnings increased by 12.3% over the 135.5 billion profit made in the year ended 2017, when the interest loans were lowered. What is the reason behind the profits, and what does this translate to the banking sector?
You have an interest rate cap which was brought on the narrative that banks are making too many profits, and then you need to tame them. Many analysts called it out that it's a wrong policy to put an interest rate cap, because the effect has been that you deny ordinary people loans because you cannot profile their risk. So what the interest rate cap did was that anyone between me and you and others, we have the same risk. So if bank will give you a loan, it means me and you can share the same risk despite our capability to pay the loans itself. So banks shied away because you cannot risk everyone neutral. So we removed that thing that banks can risk people differently and then loan you according to your risk. So what that brought is that banks concentrated on corporates and then concentrated on government bonds. So you look at those profit margins, I think probably almost close to half will be dealing with government treasuries and bonds. We've seen also government itself has gone into the local market and borrowed a lot of money from, and then these are banks that will pay those, will loan, government will buy the treasury bonds. So most of those profits are coming from corporate world and government itself. But in terms of the banking sector itself, I think we are in a serious problem with the interest rate cap because SMEs are not getting money, so it slows down the economy itself. So the long-term effect is that unless we change it now, as soon as possible, we can help to try and damage control the problem that we have. But banks will still continue to posting those huge profits because they have a top tier. Those are, in fact, those banks that are reported making that profit are those top tier banks. There's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Tier 3 are completely shut out of business. Yeah, they're not doing well. So tier 2 are there manageable, but tier 1 are the people who are making those huge profits. So you look at the banking sector, the interest rate cap brought that it should tame banks, did not work as it is because it was a wrong policy.
Over to another business moment that makes it to the Big Ten this week. Now, Kenyan commercial banks tightened their grip on the public debt, exposing taxpayers to higher interest payments.
Now, the stock debt contracted from domestic and foreign commercial banks hit 2.23 trillion Kenyan shillings, which translates to 42.25% of the 5.27 trillion gross debt.
Now, the share of the public debt by Kenyan commercial banks rose 40.17% of the 4.57 trillion Kenyan shillings as of December 2017 and 36.71% of the 3.83 trillion shillings as of last year.
Now, the Treasury has racked up 822.56 billion Kenyan shillings worth of fresh commercial debt throughout December 2018 in 2 years. Now, the foreign commercial banks account 480.03 billion Kenyan shillings of this.
Now, this underlines Kenya's over-reliance on the local and international capital markets like the Eurobonds to raise funds to service its gaping budget deficit. What does this translate to you, the taxpayer?
Government has acquired a lot of debt, and then there are short-term debts. It means your maturity date is around a period of within 5 years. So most of the debts are maturing fast, and I think this year and next year, a lot of debt. If you look at the budget of 2018-2019, there was 800 billion was going to be used to pay debts. So 800 billion is around, I think, almost a third of the total budget itself. In terms of revenue, in terms of what KRA collects, it's around almost 60% of revenue that KRA collects will be going to pay debt. So government itself doesn't have a lot of money because in terms of revenue itself, it's only 40% that goes to do government business, ministries and all those kind of allocation, paying salaries and all those kind, which is not enough. So government has to borrow. So they're borrowing another Eurobond because of that. So the effect of it is that the taxpayer is still being bundled with, overburdened by debt. You'll continue to be paying debt for so many years. And the problem that government has not addressed is that how can we scale down our budget that we fund things that are necessary? Because we are reading a very huge budget that a taxpayer cannot afford. Because every year you have a projection budget are moving up, but revenues are stagnant. So we are living beyond our means, and it's high time that government looks at that fact and reality and says we need to scale down our budget, maybe remove 1 trillion of things that are not necessary, and then we live within our means that taxpayer can afford. So unless government does that, it will continue being on that treadmill of borrowing every time. And the long-term effects is that we'll be in a debt trap. When you take a loan, government takes a loan, it's the taxpayer who pays it. So it means that every loan that government takes, be ready that government will come and ask for payment for it in another way or not. Like the recent, there are other laws that were passed on taxation in last year, end of last year. Those laws mostly are brought because government needs to raise revenue. And government needs to raise revenue because one of the elements in our budget and our economy itself is that debt repayment has gone very high. So government has to find ways to raise revenue to pay debt. Whether we default in debt and all that, those loans has to be paid. So the more government continues taking, the more it burdens the taxpayer that government is taking loan on your name and you will have to pay it one way or another.
We end on a good note as an estimated of 306 Kenyans rose to the ranks to become dollar millionaires, defying the economic headwind of raising their net worth to over 100 million Kenyan shillings, excluding their primary residences.
Now, the 2019 Knight Frank's Wealth Report also names 9,482 Kenyans among the high net worth individuals representing, in 2018, representing a 3% growth over the same count in 2017.
4 Kenyans have joined an elite group of super wealthy persons known as the ultra-high net worth individuals, with net worth over 3 billion Kenyan shillings, pushing their numbers to 125.
Now, the number of wealthy Kenyans, at least over 100 million Kenyan shillings, is set to rise by 24% for over the next 5 years, right, to 11,584 in 2023. Question is, how do you get into the rich bandwagon as the rich continue to accumulate their wealth?
My opinion is that that research was wrong, because you don't look at how many people have scaled up. The context should be how many people have moved from that bracket down, because people need, there's fluctuation, because as you say, there's a problem with our economy. So chances are many people are falling back. You might have, maybe it's 300 who moved up. You might have 1,000 who are dropping down. So it doesn't give a proper context on what exactly we are talking about. There are many questions about that research that you need to analyze. What exactly are they looking at? Are they looking at income? Where exactly are these 300 people? Which sectors are they coming from? Because we know most of the sectors are doing badly. You talk about agriculture, you talk about manufacturing. Most of these sectors are going down. The only booming sector is entrepreneurship, where people get tenders from government and all that. So we need a proper context on what exactly they're talking about in that research. But I think that research is misleading, because we don't have the exact figures on how many people dropped compared to our economy. vis-a-vis on looking at our economy, I think the number of people who dropped are more than the people who scaled up. An economy is an integrated one. Whether in other sector, there is a ripple effect that is happening somewhere, will get to you. So it's very hard to swim against the tide unless you're doing something, an outlier out of what is happening in the economy itself. So unless maybe you have people in diaspora or investors outside who will want to come and invest, so you're not completely affected with the things that are happening here. So you're cushioned in terms of liquidity. People can give you money to do projects here and there. But if you're looking at doing a business within Kenya itself, it means that the ordinary person has to have money that he or she can transact business. So the disposable income has to be there. If it's not there, everyone suffers so long as you're doing business in that economy. So unless you're a top investors, those who bring money and all those kind of things, yeah, you can manage. But I think I will hate to bring the bad news, but the bad news is that we are not doing very well. So if you're a business person, you need to you tighten your belt and scale down on what you're doing, and then you focus that you're very efficient. That's how you can manage to stand this time that we are. In the next 5 years, I think we'll still be paying debt as a country, a lot of debt, because government is continuing taking debt. We have a lot of debt that are, in fact, we're starting paying the SGR debt itself, I think starting this year. Next year, we are paying around 1.1 trillion in terms of debt. That 1.1 trillion means around 70% of what KRA collects goes to debt. So in the next 4 to 5 years, the biggest problem that we'll have is debt repayment, and we might find ourselves in a debt trap if you're not careful. So that's the biggest problem that we have, unless it's addressed now.
Now, Now, if you want more of the Big Ten stories, do follow us on our social media platforms. That is at Metropol TV KE on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, as well as Instagram. My name is Brandon Yamichaba.
My name is Simba. I just shall stay again.
Till next time.